Hi, and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here, and today I'm going to be showing you one of the things you can do if you inadvertently ruin a painting. It's quite a drastic measure, but I think you'll enjoy it. I find it very satisfying, especially if the painting has gone horribly wrong. Now here's the painting in question. It's a line and wash, and the washes just got completely muddy. They got away from me. They're overworked. There's no brightness or transparency there. It's a really heavy painting, which is a shame because I'm really pleased with the line work. So I decided to try something that I occasionally do, and that is to put the entire painting in the sink or in the bath or the shower and just run the tap, and with a soft cloth or a soft sponge gently rub away and allow the paint to just wash off the page. It's important at this stage not to scrub because we don't want to ruin the surface of the paper. We just want to remove as much paint as we can. Beware of doing this with very, very cheap paper. It probably isn't up to the job. You may find it sort of falls apart because it's not strong enough, heavy enough in weight, or got enough sizing in it. But with a reasonable quality paper, either cotton or pulp, you should be able to gently wipe away a lot of the paint. And depending on the kind of paint that you're using, you could be left with almost back to the white paper, or maybe some staining will remain if you use staining colours like phthalo blues, and some of the quinacridones can be staining as well. But hopefully what you'll be left with is a sort of much paler overall covering of paint, so that you can then go in again and use it as a practice piece. And you never know, sometimes you'll find out that you can end up with some really nice paintings this way, because the pale paint colour that you're left with can often sort of show through as you build up your new washes and can add a sort of extra layer of subtlety to it. So as soon as you've wiped off all the paint, clean out and wring out your sponge till it's almost dry, or your cloth, and then wipe off all the surplus water from the paper so that it's not sort of sopping wet with running water. And then you can either leave it to dry completely and then start from scratch, or you can start painting wet into wet onto the damp paper, which is what I'm going to show you now. And I'm going to be using two colours, raw sienna, that's Cotman, student quality, but I'm trying out my artist quality Winsor & Newton Payne's Grey, which is, as you can see, very much like indigo. It's a beautiful colour. So my paper is already damp, and I'm mixing up two puddles in my palette of those colours, and I'm going to start off by brushing the raw sienna across sort of the horizon line, coming up into the sky a little way, and then I'm going to bring it down across the land, and then into my Payne's Grey, which is a really beautiful, rich, dark, cold, sort of coolish neutral. Really nice colour. It's a lot bluer than my usual Cotman Payne's Grey, so it's going to be interesting to see how this looks. Then using my Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch Mottler brush, you could use a Harky brush or any wash brush for this. I'm bringing that colour down the page using horizontal brush strokes. My board is at an angle of about 45 degrees, so gravity will help this wash to soften out and flow. I'm going to give it a quick spray to loosen up the wash with the water mister. You can see it starting to run down the page now, and so I can reinforce the dark with a stronger mix of my Payne's Grey across the top with these very gentle brush strokes. I'm not scrubbing at all, but gently creating this graduated wash. I've now laid my board flat, and that stops the washes from running down the page. And then using the tips of the brush, I can start to blend slightly between the Payne's Grey and the raw sienna, and just bring in the impression of clouds. And I can also just bring in some of that lovely Payne's grey into the landscape. It's quite interesting working on this painting where I've washed off the previous coat of paint. Because there's colour there, it's less intimidating than working on a pure white page. And it can be quite a sort of liberating experience to paint like this, because you ruined the painting, so there's nothing more to lose by trying an experiment like this. So you take the pressure off yourself and you tend to relax a lot more. So that's the flat brush. So with my 3/4 inch flat brush, I've feathered the Payne's grey into the raw sienna, and I'm beginning to get in my tree line. Because this is a line and wash and my line work is already there, it's just a matter of sort of putting colour into my line work where I think I need it. The line work will be provided to my patrons on Patreon, so if you're interested in that, please follow the link below. I've now switched to a round brush. It's a size 14 Escoda Perla synthetic round brush. It's got a great point, and I'm continuing now to work on building up my scene. If you want to pause the video at the beginning, you can copy the line work quite easily. It's a really simple scene with just the line work for the hills, and there's the hedges, the trees and the gate. So please feel free to do that if you want to have a go at a painting like this, or just use this technique for any of your own sort of paintings. If you're like me, you've probably got a pile of paintings that haven't worked out, so they can be a perfect starting point to experiment on sort of washing off the old paint and then starting afresh. And once you've tried this washing off technique, I think you're going to find that you can use it in more subtle ways. You could say, for example, if you liked your sky but you're unhappy with the land, you could very carefully avoid the sky with any kind of wet or water and carefully wash off the land or the area that you weren't happy with, or vice versa, and then continue to work into that. I know that the great painter John Blockley used to do this a lot, and I think there's a lot of painters that will maybe use sponges to remove certain parts of their paintings again and again, and then just build up more texture and layers in this way. But as I said before, in order to do this method or use this method, the paper that you're using has to be able to take it. So try it out on sort of your paper first, just to make sure that it will take this sort of double wetting. You can see the scene is coming together. I've just brushed some shadow across the foreground, sort of just to close off the foreground path a little bit. And just to sort of also use as another sort of device to lead the eye into the painting. And I'm much happier with it the way it is. I quite like the way this lovely deep blue Payne's grey is working out with the raw sienna. It's not a particularly realistic colour combination. It's quite stylised, but it really does give me that sense of nightfall and that last glow of light across the horizon. And then the last thing I'm going to do at this stage is use my palette knife to sort of scrape out back to the paper some highlights just in the foreground across the path. They'll probably close up a little bit as the paint dries, but that will just give me a few highlights. And now I'm going to go and make a cup of coffee and let this dry completely, and then come back and finish the painting. So here's the painting so far. I've raised my table easel and board up to 45 degrees again, and this is my preferred angle for painting. And I'm going to mostly use my Escoda size 14 Perla synthetic round brush to just put in some darks and a few details. So I'm working some darks in and around the texture in the foreground. And I'm going to just do exactly the same across the hedges and around the bases of the trees, across the path, and then finally the gate. The gate being my centre of interest or my focal point is where I'm trying to lead the eye towards. So the direction of my grasses in the foreground on the left is bending over up towards the gate. The path sort of leads towards the gate, as do the hedges. And the light shines around the gate, behind the gate, reflected onto the path. So I'm hoping that everything here is working to guide the viewer's eye to that focal point, and then from the gate to the distant downs beyond. This is based on, well, loosely based on a scene from sketches and photographs of the South Downs near Cookmere Haven on the South Downs Way. I'm working with wet paint onto the dry painting here, so I'm not having the same softening and diffusing. I'm getting hard edges, as you can see, with my darks, and that's what's helping these darks and these details to stand out more, because the eye is drawn and focuses more on the hard marks and the hard shapes, whereas the eye will sort of slip over the soft and gentle diffusions. So this is why we use detail and darks to finish off the painting, because of course when we're painting with watercolours we're generally painting from light through to dark. So as a general rule our lighter colours are going to be softer and more diffused, more soft edged, and then the darker colours will bring the painting together and give us that extra definition. So now I'm just using a much paler version of, or a paler mix, I should say, of Payne's Grey, and pulling it across the top of the hills in the background. The reason for keeping this nice and pale is that I don't want to distract the eye too much, and also to try to create aerial perspective, depth and distance by using paler, cooler colours in the distance. So I'm just bringing that sort of cool pale blue across the tops of the hills just to give them a little bit of shape and to reduce the glow behind the gate on the actual hills themselves, and that itself will give us the depth and distance and hopefully will push the gate forward a little bit further. And don't forget, when you're painting wet onto the dry painting, you can soften things back with your finger or with a tissue, just to get some of the paint blending a bit more into the background wash. As I approach the end of the painting, I've now mixed up a really rich mixture, quite dry, of my Payne's Grey, and I'm just painting it along the underside of all of my gate bars and the sides of my posts, just to allow them to sort of stand out a bit more and to be in shadows with these darks. This in itself is, these darks are really sort of bringing that glow of light behind the gate out even more. Just re-establishing excuse me, some more darks here and there around the gate. If I can keep all those darks, or most of them, focused around the gate, that's where the eye will look. But I obviously need to add a few darks here and there throughout the rest of the painting as well, in order to give it sort of some tonal harmony, if you see what I mean. So I think that's just about finished. Off screen, or off camera rather, I just painted in a few birds. Again, this links this very large sky to the land. And as you can see here, it just adds a little bit more focus around the focal point as well. Whatever you can do to draw the eye to your focal point is really useful. But also, as I say, to sort of, with a big sky like this, it needs something just to link the sky to the land and to add a little bit of life. So I'm removing the tape now. You can see a little bit of the paint has leaked into the tape here and there, and that's because of washing it off washing the old painting off under the tap, and that has given me that. But I really don't mind, because that would be covered by the frame should this painting be framed. And here's the old painting, just for comparison again. And I hope you'll agree that I think it's a great improvement. It's completely different. It's quite bold. And I think it works really nicely. Often this approach of washing a painting off and going in again will give you a much more sort of relaxed feeling before you start the painting, because there's nothing to lose, but of course there's everything to gain. You could end up with some really interesting effects and a totally different painting to the one that you'd thought you were setting out on painting, and that in itself can be very exciting. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you'll give something like this a go, either with your old failed paintings or in the future if you find you've inadvertently overworked a painting or you're not happy with it. You can simply either wash the whole thing off or wash part of it off and go back in again, and you can end up with some really surprising results this way. And it's a really good way of not wasting watercolour paper, which of course could be quite expensive. So if you like this, then please leave us a thumbs up, and please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone that supports us on Patreon. And we'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.